Whether you're a skeptic or a believer, join me, Rob McConnell, as together we'll investigate the world of the paranormal and the science of parapsychology here on the X-Zone Radio TV show on XZBN and the X-Zone TV channel on Simul TV. Since 1990, the X-Zone Radio TV show has been the place where people dare to believe and dare to be heard. Together, we'll investigate UFOs, aliens, ghosts, Bigfoot, psychic phenomenon, lake monsters, conspiracy theories, government cover-ups, the truth embargo, alien abductions, ESP, haunted locations from around the world, and so much more. With over 28 years of broadcasting and more than 4,500 individual guests, the X-Zone is truly a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality, as evidenced by the credibility, integrity, and professionalism of the guests that we bring to our international audience. If you have seen a UFO, had a close encounter, seen a ghost, Bigfoot, lake monster, or a story that you would like to share or have investigated, contact me, Rob McConnell, by sending me your email to xzone@xzoneradiotv.com, or you can call toll-free 1-800-610-7035, extension 143, and on Skype, X-Zone Radio TV. For more information on the X-Zone Radio TV show with yours truly, Rob McConnell, visit www.xzoneradiotv.com or www.xzonetvchannel.com or simultv.com and xzbn.net. Until next we meet here in the X-Zone from our broadcast center and studios in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada, always remember, X-Zone Nation, keep your eyes to the sky and your heart in the light.
Welcome back to another episode of Cal's Corner Radio here on the X-Zone Broadcast Network. My name is Kal Korff and I'm your host, and the executive producer of the show is the one and only Rob McConnell. Folks, as I say pretty much at the top of every episode, the purpose of the show is to cover everything from politics to the paranormal. While we don't literally cover all of those subjects in one episode because we have a limit of time, of course, we do cover stuff that, again, is within the spectrum of politics to the paranormal. Tonight's show is going to be no different. We're going to pick up where my last appearance on Rob McConnell's X-Zone radio show happened a few days ago. I was invited to be on Rob's show, which I've always enjoyed appearing on. Rob is a good friend, longtime acquaintance. But the occasion this time for the show was not a happy one. We were reminiscing and mourning the passing of nuclear physicist and famed UFO researcher Stanton Friedman. As many people who know me are aware, I kind of grew up with Stanton Friedman. He was a mentor of mine, kind of a father figure, literally. I used to not only repeat a lot of what he said verbatim, but if it weren't for Stanton Friedman, I would never have started lecturing when I was age 13. And I owe Stanton a lot for that. We didn't always disagree. In fact, in high school, when we had a press conference together that I arranged, I started to see problems. We remained friends, even though we disagreed on certain cases, Roswell being the main one. I happen to be the author of the best-selling Roswell expose of all time, called The Roswell UFO Crash, What They Don't Want You to Know. And the they in the title is UFO researchers, including Stanton Friedman. There's a lot of information that destroyed their claims, but they didn't want you to know. So my book, for better or worse, exposes the top 22 best-selling books on Roswell ever written, including Philip Corso. The revised edition, available from Random House Bantam Books, available on Amazon.com, has the Corso expose. It was the first book to do that. Now, having said that, meaning I grew up with Stanton Friedman, I do believe there is life elsewhere in the universe. It has to exist or we can't. We can't be an exception to the laws of the universe. But whether life is visiting us, that's another question entirely. The evidence to say that we are being visited by aliens is much higher than the evidence required to say life is out there in the universe. Because based on scientific measurements of the cosmos, we can tell that there are basically all the essential amino acids out there in the stars out there and planets to have life-bearing life as we know it. We haven't found any yet, but let's be honest. We're lucky. We haven't even, been back to the moons. We've got a long ways to go. Now, the reason I'm mentioning all of this is because now that Stanton Friedman has passed away, there's a question and kind of a cloud that hangs over the UFO field. There is no question that Friedman got many UFO cases wrong, and they weren't small UFO cases, they were major ones. On the other hand, there is no question that if Friedman had not been who he was, we wouldn't even know a fraction of what we think we know now. In other words, look at Roswell. It ended up being Project Mogul, regardless of what UFO nuts say. To this day, there's still no evidence an alien spacecraft crashed there. But Friedman swore there was. He was the father of Roswell because he had met Jesse Marcel. He had done the investigation. But Friedman never got a copy of Marcel's military file. I did. So did Bob Todd. In fact, my book was the first one and only one at that time to publish large portions of that military file. And the military file proved that Major Jesse Marcel, contrary to popular belief and even the myths that are spread by his children, we're talking about Jesse Marcel II, Jr., who passed away recently, and now Jesse Marcel III, who recently came out. Mourning Stanton Friedman, I understand that. But let's be blunt here. Let's be truthful. Doesn't matter who the people are involved here. We must always defer to the truth where we can. The fact is, Major Jesse Marcel claimed he flew the wreckage to, Texas in General Ramey's office. He didn't. Marcel was never a pilot. Now you have to think about that. He was with the 509th group in Roswell, New Mexico, the only nuclear group in the world. An elite group of pilots who dropped the atomic bombs on Japan came out of that airbase. It was the only nuclear airbase in the world. So it was the bad of the badasses. Talk about top guns. Marcel wasn't it. So there was a lot of pressure there, according to people I talked to who knew him, for him to kind of be bigger than he really was. And what's interesting, when you look at Major Marcel's military report, again, it's published in my book, there was a review of him done right after Roswell happened, and it says very clearly by his reviewing officer, I believe it was Colonel Payne, the adjutant to the commander of the base, General Blanchard, or Colonel Blanchard. As I recall, he said, without having it in front of me, that this officer has a tendency to magnify problems he's confronted with. Now, think about that. Now, the military is famous for using special jargon. So rather than saying this guy exaggerates, they said he has a tendency to magnify problems he's confronted with. Well, gee, what had just happened before that review? Roswell, he said they found a flying disc. It turned out to be a weather balloon. It wasn't really a weather balloon. It was a weather balloon as far as the material goes. But the mission of Project Mogul was to spy on Russia. And the reason they wanted Project Mogul and funded it for years, and the reason it was as classified as a Manhattan Project of World War II, is because they found out that sound travels in the upper atmosphere. At high altitudes of around 40,000 feet or so, depending on the type of sound, it can literally travel around the world. You can hear stuff going on the other side of the planet. So U.S. scientists figured out that by studying the atmosphere and listening to the acoustical signatures, they could study the Russians who were working on a nuclear bomb themselves. They didn't have it yet. And they wanted Russia to test their bomb above ground. That makes sense. We didn't have satellites back then. And it was hard to fly a spy plane over Russia. You could get shot down. We didn't really have advanced stuff in 1947. The U-2 was years away from being developed. Then what happened is they used the weather balloon story as a cover-up so that the Russians never knew the military purpose of Project Mogul. They thought, oh, it's a weather balloon. Who cares? If Stalin had found out that we were spying on him by Project Mogul, that we had launched a device up there 10 years into the air before Sputnik was launched up into space by the Russians, the whole Cold War history would have changed. So I understand why the government covered it up. The size of this device attached to a series of balloon trains was higher than the Statue of Liberty and the Washington Monument. It was over 650 feet in length. That's a couple of football fields. Do the math, okay? Yes, it was huge. There's a lot of debris. But even Jesse Marcel never said he saw a piece of a flying saucer, meaning he never saw an engine. He never saw dead bodies. In fact, the last interview he gave to reporter Bob Pratt, which people like Friedman didn't want to talk about, is he said, Marcel, I have never believed, or I don't believe in little green men. Well, imagine if you're Major Jesse Marcel, and according to Friedman and others, you have recovered the pieces of a crashed alien spacecraft. Why wouldn't you believe in little green men? Wouldn't that be the ultimate proof of them, even if it was an unmanned probe sent by little green men? So the whole thing just doesn't make any sense. And as my book proved, when you look at the original Roswell witnesses, remember I grew up with Bill Moore, Stan Friedman, knew them very well. Bill Moore published my first Meyer expose book. Even Bill Moore not only endorsed my Roswell book later when it came out, he said point blank to me right out of high school, and I went public with this years ago and in the book, that Stanton Friedman was being used by people like Richard Doty and the so-called aviary, which was something that his friend Jamie Shandera had made up with him, okay? Wasn't even a Doty idea. And that they were essentially useful idiots being fed disinformation. And now all these years later, as we see the same names popping up again, Hal Puthoff, Ronald Pandolfi, Kit Green, George Knapp, all these guys go back a long time, essentially promoting disinformation and paranormal nonsense. It is ridiculous. So now the question becomes, what happens to so-called ufology now that Stanton Friedman isn't around anymore to push the myths? Meaning, Friedman was the greatest advocate of the MJ-12 hoax, and it was a hoax. No question. But he believed it. And he sold a lot of books pushing it, made a lot of money. Roswell, same thing. We now know it didn't hold up. On the other hand, Friedman was right about certain Roswell witnesses being liars, like Frank Kaufman. Other researchers endorsed Kaufman up the you-know-what, only to have egg on their face. Shame on them. The evidence was always there to prove Kaufman was a liar. In fact, Art Levine, who's a reporter I know personally and have worked with, he exposed Kaufman in one phone call. And other researchers just couldn't do this. And he published this in U.S. News Report, called him a lying old coot, quote unquote. And yet UFO researchers just couldn't find the data that Art Levine did with one phone call. It's ridiculous. So now Roswell has lost its main proponent. The MJ-12 hoax has lost its main proponent. The Hill case now has lost its main proponent. Now, just because a proponent is no longer alive doesn't mean that a case dies. It depends on how valid that case is. And in the case of these UFO reports, okay, it turns out that they are not what Friedman and others have long claimed. And it is there's absolutely no reason for why this has happened. So what you're going to see in the next issue of the X Chronicles is a story that I have written, citing chapter and verse, showing where this stuff went south and establishing the real legacy of Stanton Friedman, what he got right, what he got wrong. We'll be back after this break.
It's hard to listen to the news without realizing we're living in volatile, unprecedented times. Yet never has there been such an opportunity to transform the human condition. As old structures fail, where can we find the guidance to co-create a better way? Find Your Path Home is an ever-evolving, leading-edge information, education, and healing resource center designed to support and guide you on your path to unity and enlightenment. Based on sound principles employed by shaman worldwide, we provide techniques that can support you through the current transitions, offering online shamanic classes, international long-distance shamanic healing sessions, complimentary Mission Evolution radio episodes and Stairway to Heaven TV vignettes, seminars, retreats, and much more. All of this can be found on findyourpathhome.com.
So I was watching the X Zone TV channel last night when I was abducted by aliens, and they kept repeating to me over and over again, simultv.com, simultv.com.
What's simultv.com?
That's what I asked them. They had it written on the side of their UFO.
How do you spell that?
UFO.
No, I mean simultv.com.
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 Right. simultv.com.
Interesting that you were abducted by aliens in a simultv.com UFO last night.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. Now that you mention it, I remember now last night I was awakened from a deep sleep. My great-grandmother was standing there. She said she'd come from the hereafter to tell me about simultv.com. She even spelled it out for me. simultv.com, sonny boy.
simultv.com.
simultv.com, sonny boy.
Wow.
Yeah.
Guys, you'll never guess what my psychic guru just told me.
simultv.com.
Exactly. Are you guys psychic too?
Of course.
We all know about simultv.com. simultv.com.
Welcome back to the second segment here on Cal's Corner Radio Show on the X Zone Broadcast Network. My name is Kal Korff, and I'm your host. The executive producer of the show is Rob McConnell. As we were talking about before the break, in the next issue of the X Chronicles, which will be out in a few days, there will be a lead story that exposes some things about Stanton Friedman that have never been known before. And when I say that, it's because this information is not on the internet unless Rob McConnell or myself decide to put it there. And yes, it's going to go up there. What bothers me as a longtime UFO researcher are today's internet generation of UFO researchers. Now, again, I'm not painting everybody with the same brush. Don't even go there. But let's be honest. Too many people believe that if it's on the internet, it must be true. And yet about a third of the information in Wikipedia is false. In fact, Wikipedia was cited in a study years ago as being a key reason as to why the average grades in American high schools dropped down one level because they would just copy and paste from Wikipedia. Students would. And the teachers, knowing better, would nail them. So getting back to the issue of UFO research, a lot of UFO data is just not on the internet. And this is priceless golden stuff that really allows you to connect the dots. It lies buried somewhere in people's archives. Somebody has died, their magazine collection, files collection got passed down or lost or whatever. Over the years, back in the United States, I remember buying entire collections from used bookstores of UFO magazines and books and so on, finding all kinds of material that I could. Well, I have had for years, off and on, of course, an extensive archive of stuff. And of course, I've got thousands of letters that I've written over the years since I was a boy in high school on my old Smith Corona typewriter to all kinds of people, ranging from Dr. Carl Sagan to Stanton Friedman to Hynek to Phil Klass. I got along with all of them. And I'm going to share one little tidbit from the upcoming story that's exclusive to the X Zone and the X Chronicles. When I met Stanton Friedman, I was 13 years old. Okay, I met him in 1975. My dad took me to see him lecture. And the moment I saw Friedman lecture, I thought, well, I could do that. I know all the data. I'd been studying UFOs since 11. And 2 years later, everything he's saying I'm familiar with. So I started lecturing. People said I had a gift for speaking. I still don't know if that's true today, but I've done a lot of lectures. I know that. So people seem to get into what's being said or whatever. It depends on the data, the delivery, and so on. I've done a lot of lectures on different subjects in many countries around the world on TV and so on. And I love lecturing. I love communicating and meeting with people. One of the last times I met Stan, we were in Portland, Oregon. I was promoting my Roswell book, which had come out, destroying his research. But yet we were friends. He didn't attack me. You can try to Google it. There's really no attacks against me from Stanton, because we were always in communication through mutual acquaintances or back channels. And at the end of the day, we weren't going to make it personal. We agreed to disagree. So I'm going to share with you one little tidbit that's in the article. When I met Stanton Friedman when I was 13, and I got to know him, and he moved very close nearby, and I ended up living essentially 2 blocks from where he was. Went over his house all the time, investigated a lot of cases together, He would be too busy traveling around. I'd grab the files, go run the trap to it, figure out whatever, come back, report to him, etc. This went on many famous cases. And these will be detailed in the upcoming article. But there was one little thing that was rather, let's say it's kind of a human indicator here. Because I was such a young boy, I was afraid that people wouldn't take me seriously. Adults tend to do that. So I told Friedman, I said, please don't tell anybody my age. So I still have, to this day, a letter from Friedman saying this at the very end, the secret of your age is safe with me. Friedman didn't tell anybody that I was a kid. And because I was writing letters on a typewriter to scientists all over the world, anybody I wanted to, senator, whatever, I was always in their face. And kids or adults would say, well, who do you think you are to have the right to write so-and-so? I'd say, well, I'm me. I can write anybody I want. What is your problem? That was my view, and I still hold that view today. So for years, as I interacted with Hynek through the mail, on the phone a lot, with Phil Klass, debated Phil Klass on KOME radio when I was in high school, he had no idea I was a kid. And Phil told me later when I met him in D.C., when he told me first about Mogul and how Roswell was unraveling, that he had no idea that the person who had kicked his ass, quote unquote, was a young teenager. So it was because of Stanton Friedman that I was able to learn how to debate. I still have not lost a debate as of today. I believe that if you don't know the subject, you shouldn't debate it. Just admit it. If you can't defend it with facts, don't bother. And what Friedman did in his last debates, they were really bad. And what I mean is you can actually look on the internet a kind of an account of a debate he had years ago with Robert Schaefer. Schaefer creamed him. Friedman, after that, said he wouldn't debate anymore. And that was wrong. Never be afraid to debate people if you know you're right. But if you can't prove you're right and hold your point, then of course you shouldn't be debating at all. And there was one debate I was going to do years ago on Roswell, which ended up being canceled. I'm willing to do that anytime, anywhere, any place, unconditionally. I'm not in Prague anymore. I don't have to worry about those threats and the stupidity of the Czech police at times. I'm being blunt, but that happened years ago. So getting back to Friedman, when I invited him to lecture with me in high school, we were raising money for my school. In my high school, our class raised money by doing car washes and selling light bulbs door to door. I didn't want to do that. I'd like to hang out at a car wash if there was a nice bunch of, girls there in a bikini, I guess, as a teenager. But other than that, I have no interest in it. So I approached the head of our class, Fred Davis. I said, Fred, I lecture a lot. I'm on TV and all that. I said, why don't I lecture? We'll charge $2 a head, sell it through Ticketron, the tickets. I'll invite Stanton Friedman with me. We'll give him half the money, and I'll give you my share of the money to the class, okay? They said, yeah, go do it. Now, what's interesting is the school didn't really back me on it, meaning the class itself, these so-called rah-rah cheerleader types, the ones that were, the school types, pro school. They all hung out together. I wasn't part of that crowd. I was more of the nerdy scientific crowd. And so what happened is they kind of let me do my thing. The school let me do my thing. They let me come and go when I wanted to. If I told them I had a lecture in San Francisco, I'd still get credit for attendance that day because I'd show up to school, go off to San Francisco, lecture, come back in the afternoon, and so on. They let me do all that because they thought, he's going to become a better student this way. And they also kind of used me as a bit of a poster child, if you will. Well, here's an example of what our system can do. Had nothing to do with it, but I will tell you, I had great teachers. I have teachers I'm still in touch with today. You can see who they are on Facebook. My Facebook page is not locked. It's not private. It's open book. And these teachers will be honest. They remember me being yanked out of high school over Kennedy's assassination by the U.S. government, the House Select Assassinations Committee. They remember what happened when Friedman was down there and so on. So I've started releasing these articles that I've had for years that are not on the internet that capture the history as captured by the news at that time. And what you're going to see is an article that has quotes in it from Friedman that will scare you. In the upcoming X-Zone exclusive, you will see quotes from Friedman that even the press reported, and it's in the article, that I was shocked. I'm not going to explain anything more. I'm not trying to deliberately tease you. But there's no point in doing the article and releasing it if I'm going to spill everything in it right now. I'll talk about it later. But the best way to view this data and digest it is word by word in this extensive article that will be in the X Chronicles coming up in a few days, courtesy of Rob McConnell. All right, let's switch now to how the UFO field is probably going to be after Friedman's passing. Right now, let's just call it a cluster frenzy. I'd use a different variation of that word if this were not a family show. It's been that way when Friedman was alive. You have people like George Knapp, Bob Lazar, other hoaxers out there running around. You've got this ridiculousness with the History Channel hyping a phony UFO show as if it's real. Bob Kvyat has sued people over a scam that was going on. There's a lot going on right now. And this show and Rob's show has chronicled some of this. What's going to happen this year is, I believe, game-changing. I believe that a year from now, when you Google this stuff, you're going to see a very different course. On June 7th, that's weeks away, folks, the book Annie Jacobsen's Area 51 book Scandal will be out. It exposes Annie Jacobsen's work, her best-selling #1 book on Area 51. It destroys her claims. Now, I will tell you that she was first exposed 7 years ago in Daily Post newspaper in India. I know that because I wrote that expose. I also wrote, depending on the version, a 12 to 15-page paper exposing her. That was also published and released. So, personally and professionally, it bothers me that 7 years, 8 years later, this ridiculousness still has legs. So it's time to take it out and put it out of its misery. Annie Jacobsen has no excuse for either not knowing or ignoring the formerly classified Department of Justice report on the life and death of Joseph Mengele. It contains such detailed information on this former Nazi angel of death at Auschwitz that they nailed him with the DNA analysis proving he was really dead. They know where he was. They know he didn't go to Russia. They know he didn't go help Stalin. It is an outright lie furthered by people like Jacobsen. Jacobsen says she got this from a source. That source denies he said that. He went to his grave saying he didn't say that. This and a bunch of other stuff is in the upcoming expose. It takes no prisoners because it shouldn't. We shouldn't mess with history and have it rewritten by people who are not telling the truth and have agendas. Now, we'll be back after this commercial break, and we'll continue on this. I'll explain some of the stuff that's in the book, as well as some other major titles that are coming out a few months later that will change the UFO field.
They are here, and they've been here for thousands of years, making their presence known in the shadows. They might be seen by a lonely motorist on a deserted road late at night, or by a frightened and confused husband in the bedroom he is sharing with his wife. But who are they? What do they want? Why are they here? Perhaps most concerning, has the government been aware of their presence all along? The new book by L.A. Marzulli, UFO Disclosure, the 70-year cover-up exposed, delves into the world of UFOs. Can full disclosure be soon? Order now and receive a free hour and 37-minute DVD on the UFO phenomenon. UFOs are real. Get both the book and the DVD, a $40 value, for only $19.99. To order your book and DVD today, go to lamarzulli.net. That's LAMARZULLI.net.
Rob McConnell here, presenting an overview for Nicholas Paul Jennings, author of a fascinating book, Amen. It presents facts revealed by Egyptologists, facts that enable us to understand why Amen is the beginning of creation of God. It provides recommendations for religious leaders of the major religions to unify their beliefs and teach the Word of God. Love one another. Amen informs people how mankind conceived God. It was the Egyptians that developed the concepts of a soul, a hereafter, and Son of God, And finally, after the worship of many gods, they conceived the belief in one universal God, the maker of all there is. For more information, visit www.futureofgodamen.com. That's www.futureofgodamen.com.
You have heard of the X Zone? Now watch it on Simul TV, plus 500 video games, live TV channels, free video on demand, worldwide, and more. Does this sound like tomorrow's television? Well, it is, but you can have it today, right now. It is Simul TV. Simul TV offers what the others only wish they could provide. 15 exclusive channels like X Zone, sci-fi, and horror. We are worldwide. No other provider offers that. 500 built-in video games. No need to have an extra expensive system. We have them included. Free video on demand. Live streaming events from around the world. Interactive online network, and much more. Tomorrow's TV today. Simul TV. Sound too good to be true? Well, it's not. You can have Simul TV today. Sign up at simultv.com. Do it today.
Welcome back to the third segment here on Cal's Corner Radio Show here on the X Zone Broadcast Network. My name is Kal Korff. I'm your host, and the executive producer of the show is Rob McConnell. Now, as I mentioned in the previous segment for the commercial break, on June 7th, which is a few weeks away, there is a book coming out called Annie Jacobsen's Area 51 Book Scandal. And it is a scandal, okay? There are many people that Annie Jacobsen interviewed who have gone on record and have said they don't appreciate what she did. And Annie Jacobsen, of course, tries to come across as sweetness and light. And in this book, not only does it expose her, but it's updated with new information as well. And the reason that this book is coming out is because people need to know the truth. First of all, in my opinion, a book that claims that Roswell was caused by Stalin working with the angel of death, Joseph Mengele, the angel of death from the death camp in Auschwitz, who murdered over 1 million people. He supposedly surgically altered children to make them look like aliens. Then they got an old bat wing-shaped type craft from the Horton brothers captured by the Nazis, flew it down the coast of the United States via Alaska, crashed somehow in the desert. The idea was to cause panic among the American populace. The whole idea is just ridiculous. We know where Mengele was. We know where he hid out from the authorities. We know how he escaped from American custody using phony ID. We know who helped him. The FBI, CIA, and a whole bunch of people hunted these guys down and found the full story. And they did this many years ago, decades before Jacobsen wrote her nonsense. I got a copy of the Department of Justice's formerly classified report on Mengele. When I read it, and I was in India at the time at the Daily Post newspaper, I thought, well, I just can't ignore this. I already know, as the author of the best-selling Roswell expose of all time, that Jacobsen's full of you-know-what. But independent of that, I can go now to this DOJ report, and even Annie Jacobsen can't say it's not true. So the fact that Annie Jacobsen either was unaware of that report or ignored it, either one of those explanations is the correct answer. Maybe she'll answer it sometime. The fact that it wasn't even dealt with, which destroys her very claim, shows you what she really did. And I know, having dealt with major publishers before, that some of them do play games. And I'll cite a very real example. I remember visiting Atlantic Monthly Press over a book called Light Years by Gary Kinder. Remember that one? Promoting the Billy Meyer UFO fraud and hoax. By the way, for those who still believe in Billy Meyer and they think Light Years by Gary Kinder is a credible book, ask Gary Kinder today what he says about his own book. He will tell you he's distanced himself from everything in there. He made his money, he got out, boom. That's what he did. And Morgan and Trekken, a guy I met and confronted over what they were doing, because my Meyer book, Spacious of the Pleiades, the Billy Meyer story, was coming out from Prometheus Books. They admitted that basically there were editors that resigned in protest over publication of Kinder's book. They said, you've sold out. This book is not true. You're marketing it as real. And what they wanted to do was laugh all the way to the bank, and they did. So publishers do that. And I have found out that apparently, according to people who worked at Annie Jacobson's company, meaning the publisher who published her book, apparently when this info about Roswell happened and this so-called source, Annie Jacobson says, claimed he held one of these altered children and cradled him back in his arms and was crying and all that. Well, the publisher knew at that point that, wow, that's an interesting twist to the story on Area 51. If we leave that in the book, we're going to make more money. And sure enough, they did. It became #1 bestseller on Amazon. Disgusting. Just like Corso's book. The publisher knew it was BS, but they wanted to make money. Publishers are in the business to make money as a rule, like most companies. So you have to always factor that in. Very few publishers publish money only in the interest, or publish books only in the interest of truth. Now, having said that, and knowing how publishers have done this, this expose on Jacobson, I hope, will be successful and essentially put a stake in the ground, for lack of a better term. Then another book is coming out a couple of months later, which destroys and exposes Bob Lazar. And I wouldn't want to be George Knapp when this book comes out. That's just my personal opinion. I'm going to tell you now what I've only publicly come forth with recently. I am the only known UFO researcher and author who ever worked at KMI, Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory. Bob Lazar worked at KMI. Not only did I work at KMI, I was in touch with Friedman during that time. And I remember very vividly talking with Friedman over Lazar and how this element 115 nonsense, which today is cited by proof that Lazar is telling the truth. Well, guess what? New elements are discovered all the darn time. It's called scientific progress. So I'm just picking a number out of my head here because I haven't bothered looking up what the latest element is that they've discovered. But let's just use a number we can remember here. Let's say that the total number of elements that science has discovered to date is 150, just to use that number. Well, if I predict, using my non-existent psychic powers, that within 2 years there'll be another element, 151 is what they're going to call it. Wow. And they discover element 151. They give it the next highest number like they do every element. Gee, what kind of a scientific, or what kind of a secret revelation blowing open the cosmic Watergate is that? It's none. I know for a fact that Bob Lazar is a liar and a fraud, and you can quote me. In fact, I wish he'd take me to court and sue me over this, because I got in trouble from KMI when I was in the news over the fact that the news had covered me getting hired at Lawrence Livermore Lab, and that article has never appeared on the internet. And to this day, I've got people who are Friedman nuts who claim I lied when I said I worked there, and yet it's in the papers. And they say, oh, you can't trust newspapers. Oh, but we can trust a clipping from Roswell in 1947 that says they recovered a flying disc. But you can't, honor a newspaper clipping here that's a major story in the San Jose Mercury News about me working there, and all the details are in there, and there's no question it's true. See, a double standard here. So for years, I've taken it on the chin when I wasn't doing this show, trying to live a life as a journalist overseas and stuff like that. There's more to life than little gray leprechauns, in my opinion. And I just had to laugh at this. I remember a guy named Andre Skandras. I told him, I warned him point blank when we started this nonsense in India, when he was communicating between Friedman and I was warning him, Stan, there's new data that's been around for a while, actually. I'm just bothering to bring this up again, that destroys the Hill case. It destroys the Marjorie Fish star map. Her data was wrong because it was a long time ago, and we've learned a lot more then. But he still wouldn't budge. I got accused by Skandras of, there's no record of you ever working there. Oh, really? Bullshit. I'm sorry. So I will release that stuff when I feel like it, because I'm not in a hurry to do what's right, meaning I can nail these guys in their sleep, meaning it's about the truth. The article not only talks about how I worked at Lawrence Livermore Lab, it talks about a very specific computer project I did, which was really revolutionary. It was called HyperCard. It was written by Apple. I was on the HyperCard development team when HyperCard was given by Apple to Claris. In fact, if you get version 7.5, you see my name on there. You can use my software. I was part of that team. In fact, I was the only HyperCard stack engineer. And to show you what a small world it was, as I've talked about before on Rob's show, the main computer programmer on our team, Ed Rosenzweig, who was writing the color graphics engine, he owned a New Age bookstore in the San Francisco Bay Area, a little north of it. I think it was Sausalito. And he knew Wendell Stevens. And I was going to go to Meyer Cult Undercover, and expose it. I was growing my hair long for over a year without cutting it, never cutting my beard. People were saying he's really letting himself go. I don't know what's wrong with him. They didn't know that I was going to go undercover to bust the Meyer Cult, because I couldn't tell my guys on the HyperCard team, because Ed Rosenzweig knew Wendell. I knew Wendell. He had Wendell as a guest speaking about the Meyer case at his book show and signings. And to show you what a small world it is, and how synchronistic it is at times, even for people who don't believe in anything paranormal, my boss, Bill Duvall, on the HyperCard team, he was neighbors with Gary Kinder. Yeah, he was hired from Sun Valley, Idaho, brought down to the Bay Area at Apple Claris, became my boss. And in my interview with him for the HyperCard team, since I was drafted to go over there and I wanted to go, there was a HyperCard guy in Claris. They said, oh, by the way, I know a guy who's into UFOs. Do you know a guy named Gary Kinder? It's like, oh, my God, boy, do I know Gary Kinder. He interviewed me for his book and left out a lot of stuff I told him. He selectively chose the data, trying to spin Myers if it was positive, because, again, that was the deal. Write something positive. Get that money. Let the publisher make it. So this is all has never been really talked about in detail in public. I'll release all the details eventually in updated books and things like that. But this is the stuff that went on at the time. And what I'm telling you is 100% true. These people exist. The names are real. It's out there. In fact, my roommate, Roy Neal, that I lived with for years when we were at Apple Claris, one of his friends was Don Schoen, who was involved in the UFO Contact from the Pleiades book. Hello? In fact, when I met Roy, he's like, what about this UFO book here? I said, oh, that's a hoax. Again, small world, folks. And there's a lot of this stuff. So I was able to take advantage of the fact that when I wrote all these adults as a kid, having my Smith Corona typewriter, they assumed I was an adult, and I didn't correct them. Later on when I met them, they were like, wow. And it actually brought us even closer, because they appreciated the fact I was a little kid doing this instead of some other adult or something. Now, after the break, I'm going to tell you one other piece of trivia, which will even be more surprising. We'll be back in a moment.
They are here, and they've been here for thousands of years, making their presence known in the shadows. They might be seen by a lonely motorist on a deserted road late at night, or by a frightened and confused husband in the bedroom he is sharing with his wife. But who are they? What do they want? Why are they here? Perhaps most concerning, has the government been aware of their presence all along? The new book by Ellie Marzulli, UFO Disclosure, the 70-year cover-up exposed, delves into the world of UFOs. Can full disclosure be soon? Order now and receive a free hour and 37-minute DVD on the UFO phenomenon. UFOs are real. Get both the book and the DVD, a $40 value, for only $19.99. To order your book and DVD today, go to lamarzulli.net. That's LAMARZULLI.net.
Christopher Fulton is a survivor of the national security state. All he wanted to do was preserve history when he acquired a Cartier watch from the estate of President Kennedy's personal secretary. But that simple act set off a terrible chain reaction. He was pursued by the U.S. Justice Department and the FBI, thrust into the middle of the U.S. government's Assassination Records Review Board, even monitored and pursued by the Russian government. All because that Cartier watch was the missing link of evidence, a timepiece worn by JFK that fateful day in Dallas, a link resulting in Christopher being incarcerated and attacked for 9 years because he opened a hidden chapter in history. The intriguing journey outlined fully in Christopher Fulton's memoir, The Inheritance, is available now through TrineDay.com or Amazon.com. The Inheritance, Poisoned Fruit of JFK's Assassination by Christopher and Michelle Fulton is a must-read, an incredible tale of how easily our own government can overrule justice. The Inheritance, Poisoned Fruit of JFK's Assassination.
Welcome back to the fourth and final segment here on Cal's Corner Radio Show. My name is Kal Korff. I'm your host, and the executive producer is Rob McConnell. Boy, this always goes fast, all these 4 segments. It just seems like it's 5 minutes ago. So let's wrap this up here, and we'll again be back next week. But I want to share with you yet another small piece of trivia that's true, just to show you how much of an interconnected small world this was. When I was in high school, I was probably the most famous student in that high school. When I say famous, I mean in the media, lecturing everywhere, etc. Had articles published and so on. No one else was doing that. I was also attending college part-time when I could get away with it and sneak away from my stepfather. But independent of that, there was a guy named Brian Young, wonderful man. And he was set up to be, at least according to the kids in the class, my rival, which I thought was funny because Brian and I knew each other. We liked each other. We had some classes together. He ended up being class valedictorian. You know, he worked his you-know-what off, earned straight A's, very successful overachiever type, wonderful man. My view towards school was if I loved the subject, I was totally into it. More than 100%. If I didn't care for it, you had a hard time getting me to pay attention. I would do just what I had to do to go through the motions. I remember, for example, taking one class after I had 4 years of German. I'm in college, and they make me take German 1 again. I'm like, this is ridiculous. I had 4 years of German, graduated with a B. I could speak the language, read and write it. Had a great professor named Bruce Edwards. Still in touch with him today. In fact, we just recently reconnected again on Facebook. And they stick me in German 1 in college. I was an A+ student in American social studies and history. Wrote pages of reports that were hundreds of pages in length, turned them into my teachers. They stick me in U.S. History 101. And the final insult was, I'm a published writer. I got a book out. I've got a column in Saga UFO Report magazine. I'm writing articles, earning a living as a writer, while studying a criminal justice degree, pursuing it, but I have to take these so-called breadth requirements, basics again. So they stick me in a Composition 101 class. Like, this is ridiculous. You don't need to teach me how to write. You can teach me how to write better. You can never be a perfect writer. But don't start me with C-spot run type stuff. So I had to laugh when the professor read an article he asked me to do, and he said, well, I don't think you need to take this class. History teacher told me the same thing. German teacher told me the same thing, but you know, the system was a system back then. You had to suck up to it. So what was ironic is being a Friedman type kid, parroting and believing everything he said. And I did win arguments and debates. What happened is Byron Young ends up working for Robert Schaefer at a computer company. Robert Schaefer, of course, is one of the 3 big skeptics. Phil Klass, James Oberg, Robert Schaefer. And I thought it was ironic that my so-called rival ends up working for my ideological rival, Mr. Skeptic, Bob Schaefer. And this wasn't planned. It just ended up that way. And I didn't even know that until years later when I connected with Bob Schaefer. And I'll always be grateful to Robert Schaefer for this main reason. When he wrote that article in 1976 in Official UFO, I think it was in October, and he said that the Charles Atterberg star map was a much better fit for Betty Hill. He was right. I didn't think he was right. I thought he was wrong, and I believed everything Friedman said. So I went to Friedman and I said, "Have you seen this article?" He says, "Yes." Don't take it seriously. His mind is made up. Don't confuse me with facts. He's a noisy negativist. The usual Friedman quotes. I said, "Friedman," I said, "Stan, it's the map. If there's another map out there that is as good or better than the fish map, the Hill case is over. Because the one thing that made it different from all the other claims was this star map, which you claim was matched to Zeta Reticuli, Zeta 1 and Zeta 2 Reticuli. The only reason anyone even knows that name of those two stars now is because of people like Stanton Friedman popularizing and hyping the Hill case and Marjorie Fish's work. Now, let's be clear. Marjorie Fish did wonderful work with the data she had at the time. But when I asked Stanton, well, somebody's got to get to the bottom of this. Both can't be right. He wouldn't take up the challenge. His mind was made up. He was doing research by proclamation, folks. So I said, "Stan, I'll do it." So for the next year, straight, every week, sometimes twice a week, by snail mail, typing up the letters, licking the post stamps, putting them in the post office, sending them off to Maryland, where Atterberg lived, I threw everything at him I could. I'd go back to Friedman and say, "What about this? What about this? What about this?" He'd say, "Well, tell him this, blah, blah, blah." I'd type it all up, give it back to him. Back and forth for 1 year straight, intense, to the point where we became friends on a first-name basis. And he found out I was a kid. And this whole file, which has now been found, I thought it had been lost in a flood, but it was found. These original letters nail the Hill case, expose it, destroy Friedman's argument, destroy people's claims that the fish map is what they say it is. Again, she did a great job with what she had, but the data was wrong. Charles Atterberg used the next edition of the Gliese Star Catalog, was able to do a much more accurate match. And the fact that there is more than one match makes the Hill star map, or the Betty Hill UFO alien star map, one big Rorschach blot. Sorry, folks, that's just reality. And when you combine the new data from orbital telescopes, the fish map is completely destroyed. In fact, Discovery Channel, back a few years ago when they cared more about the truth than they do today, even mentioned that. They said there's no point in even pursuing this. Well, I don't think Stanton Friedman told people that. So this is some of the stuff that's coming out. In the upcoming X Chronicles article, you will see some quotes and some images from these documents. And when the Hill expose book comes out, the Atterberg letters and stuff will all be in there. I'm not hiding anything back. And if anybody thinks these are forgeries, I'm going to predict that some people will maybe be stupid enough to say that. I've got the originals. You're welcome to look at them. Unlike the MJ12 files, these are carbon originals. Okay? So you can date anything as long as you don't send it to a Bigelow-connected laboratory, I guess. All right, let's not get into that. All right, so that is coming out. The Betty Hill case is exposed. And this other stuff that's related to Betty Hill. I knew Betty Hill. I've got letters from her. I grilled her on her star map. Again, the case just wasn't what its proponents made it out to be. And years after that was known, which was the 70s, folks, as these documents prove, they are smoking guns. No wonder the Roswell book and this title, What They Don't Want You to Know, because it is they, a lot of these major UFO researchers today. So this year, Annie Jacobson in 3 weeks on June 7th, Bob Lazar, Betty and Barney Hill case, all will go down by the end of this year. What is left of the UFO field at that point? Well, plenty, meaning UFO reports go on all the time. Whether they're aliens visiting us, that's another issue entirely. So that stuff will continue. But some of these so-called pillars of ufology, they never really were pillars. Or if they were pillars, they were made of sand. And we're lucky that they stood that this long. Now, the Atterberg stuff I've sat on since high school. I've had it for years. But because I left the United States for 18 years and stuff, I thought the files had been lost, along with a bunch of other of my stuff, because I have stuff all over the world, as people will tell you, safely tucked away for various reasons. And it turns out that this stuff was found, and it was brought over to me in India my mother brought it to me. And I started sending photos of this stuff to close friends of mine. Rob has seen a little bit of this. And we started a movie called The Zeta Reticuli Conspiracy, started filming it in India to expose all of this. But we ended up not finishing that film. We will instead finish a new production that will take all of this out. In addition to the book, it's all being harmonized. And we will disclose that later in another couple of shows as this moves closer to, finishing these productions and actually starting some of them. I'm also going to announce one new show, which will be part of the family here. And this is a show that I'm resurrecting that I did for years. I kind of got bored with it, so I stopped, but that's not going to be the case this time because I think it's more valid today than ever. I'm relaunching and announcing this today. I'll make it exclusively available to the X Zone. Ufology 101. Ufology 101 is a series of videos that I did many years ago, but I'm redoing them, where I take different aspects of the UFO field and in a short 5-minute video that you can digest in between commercials or whether you're on a public transport on your way home or whatever, it's easily consumable on your mobile device. You'll learn the facts about one aspect of ufology. So the first episode answers the question, what is a UFO? And you'd be surprised how many people mix up the term flying saucer with UFO as if they're the same thing. So this goes back to basics, and it cites real cases as examples of those basics. But it needs to be done. That way, if anybody says whatever, they can go to this series, hopefully, and say, this is the definition of this. You're not right. One key term here, and this is my definition I made up, and I believe I'm right on this. The definition of ufology is the scientific study of UFO reports, not UFOs because they don't cooperate, UFO reports. But ufology is when you make a conclusion about UFO cases that cannot be derived from the data. That's ufology, like the Meyer case. Okay, they say it's real, but the data indicates it's a hoax. That's ufology. Roswell is ufology. The Hill case is not ufology, it was ufology. But Fish was wrong. If she tried to do it today, she would know in 5 minutes, talking to NASA, looking up online with these computers and orbital telescopes, that it just isn't going to work. So we'll continue talking about this over the next few shows. This will be very interesting. Thank you for joining me. We'll be back again next week.
If you are looking for a safe, zero-calorie natural option to the harmful artificial sweeteners on the market today, Just Like Sugar is what you're looking for. Just Like Sugar is a wonderful natural alternative for those health-conscious people who choose a calorie-restricted diet with a great, pure, sweet flavor that tastes just like sugar. Just Like Sugar is a great natural option for people suffering from diabetes and may be useful in restricted diet programs where standard sugars are not allowed and does not cause a laxative effect of some other sweeteners. Just Like Sugar comprises a perfect blend of chicory root fiber, natural calcium, natural vitamin C, and Just Like Sugar's sweetness comes from the natural flavors from the peel of the orange. Just Like Sugar is a natural alternative to harmful artificial sweeteners and will change the way that you believe all natural sweetener products taste. Just Like Sugar is available at your local Whole Foods markets, Wild Oats markets, Henry's, Sun Harvest, and many other fine natural food stores in the U.S., Canada, and worldwide. They are here, and they've been here for thousands of years, making their presence known in the shadows. They might be seen by a lonely motorist on a deserted road late at night, or by a frightened and confused husband in the bedroom he is sharing with his wife. But who are they? What do they want? Why are they here? Perhaps most concerning, has the government been aware of their presence all along? The new book by Ellie Marzulli, UFO Disclosure, the 70-year cover-up exposed, delves into the world of UFOs. Can full disclosure be soon? Order now and receive a free hour and 37-minute DVD on the UFO phenomenon. UFOs are real. Get both the book and the DVD, a $40 value, for only $19.99. To order your book and DVD today, go to lamarzulli.net. That's LAMARZULLI.net.
You have heard of the X Zone? Now watch it on Simul TV. plus 500 video games, live TV channels, free video on demand, worldwide, and more. Does this sound like tomorrow's television? Well, it is, but you can have it today, right now. It is Simul TV. Simul TV offers what the others only wish they could provide. 15 exclusive channels like X-Zone, Sci-Fi, and Horror. We are worldwide. No other provider offers that. 500 built-in video games. No need to have an extra expensive system. We have them included. Free video on demand. Live streaming events from around the world. Interactive online network, and much more. Tomorrow's TV today. Simul TV. Sound too good to be true? Well, it's not. You can have Simul TV today. Sign up at simultv.com. Do it today.